In a room filled with his entire family, my boyfriend's mother delivered her verdict on me. She smiled, a gesture that held no warmth, and announced for everyone to hear, "You are a lovely girl, Ava, but you are not wife material." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room was on me. I could feel Aaron tense beside me, but he said nothing. His hand, which had been on my back as a comfort, now felt like a weight. In that stretched-out moment, I saw the entire future she had planned for her son, a future that had no place for a woman like me. But how did we get to a point where my worth was being publicly adjudicated over canapes and polite company? To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning. I met Aaron a little over a year ago. It was at a community garden build, one of those Saturday morning volunteer events where you end up covered in dirt and feeling vaguely virtuous. I was there because my small logistics company was helping the nonprofit organize the volunteers and materials. He was there because his corporate firm encouraged employees to participate in local service projects. We were assigned to the same team, tasked with building raised garden beds. He was steady and methodical, measuring the boards twice before making a single cut. I was the one making sure our team had enough screws, that the next group had their lumber ready, and that the water delivery would arrive before everyone got dehydrated. We worked well together. He asked me out for coffee afterward. Our conversation was easy. He told me about his job in finance, the long hours, the predictable ladder he was climbing. I told him about my business, how I'd started it from my tiny apartment with one client, and was now managing logistics for a dozen small nonprofits. I told him about the professional certification I was working toward, the one that would let me expand my business into a more corporate and more lucrative sector. I also told him about my younger sister Maya, who was in college, and for whom I was the main source of financial and emotional support since our parents passed away several years ago. The differences in our backgrounds were apparent, but they didn't seem to matter at first. He came from a family where success was an inheritance, a well-trodden path. I came from a world where success was something you had to build from scratch, often with borrowed tools. His weekends were for leisure. Mine were for catching up on coursework and client invoices. These were just facts, not points of conflict. He seemed to respect my drive, and I admired his stability. After a few months of dating, he said it was time for me to meet his parents. The invitation was for a Sunday lunch at their home. I knew it was a significant step. The house was what you'd expect, large, orderly, with family photos on every available surface. His father, Robert, was a quiet, observant man with a firm handshake. He asked me a few pointed questions about my business model, seeming genuinely interested in the mechanics of it. His mother, Eleanor, was another matter entirely. She was charming, elegant, and radiated an air of unshakable control. Lunch felt less like a meal and more like a beautifully catered job interview. "Ava, Aaron tells us you run your own business. How fascinating," she said, passing me a serving dish. "What exactly is it that you do?" "I provide logistical and organizational consulting for small nonprofits," I explained. "I help them streamline their events, manage their resources, and basically operate more efficiently so they can focus on their mission." "So, party planning?" she asked, with a polite smile. "More like project management," I corrected gently. "Budgets, schedules, vendor contracts, volunteer coordination, the back-end work." "And your family, dear? Are they in business as well?" The questions kept coming, a gentle but persistent probing of my education, my family tree, my 5-year plan. I answered honestly. My father was a mechanic. My mother worked in retail. I attended a state university because it was what I could afford. I didn't embellish or apologize for any of it. It was my life. Toward the end of the meal, Eleanor smiled at her son. "Well, Aaron, she's certainly ambitious." I couldn't tell if it was an accusation or a compliment. A few weeks later, the first of Eleanor's little tests began. She invited me to a charity gala that she co-chaired. I bought a dress I couldn't really afford and went. I talked to her friends. I made polite conversation about the stock market with Aaron's uncle, and I listened intently to the speeches. I thought I'd passed. The following week, she called me. The woman who was supposed to organize the silent auction for their next fundraiser had dropped out due to a family matter. Eleanor, remembering my organizational skills, asked if I could step in. It was a significant amount of work on a tight deadline, and it was unpaid. But it was for a good cause, and I knew I could do it well. It was also a clear opportunity to show her what I was capable of. I spent the next 2 weeks working late into the night, cataloging donations, creating a bidding system, and coordinating the display. The auction was a huge success, raising 20% more than their goal. Eleanor was publicly complimentary. In private, however, she framed it differently. We were having coffee a few days later when she brought it up. You did a wonderful job with the auction, Ava. Truly. It's clear you have a talent for this sort of thing. She paused, stirring her cappuccino. It makes me wonder if your professional certification is entirely necessary. A woman with your natural abilities for organizing and managing social events could be such an asset to a family. If you had more availability, you could contribute in so many meaningful ways. Perhaps you should consider lightening your course load. I felt a chill go through me. She wasn't praising my professional skills. She was trying to redirect them into the unpaid, uncredited labor of a society wife. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, keeping my voice even. But my certification is my top priority. It's the key to the future I'm building for myself. My business depends on it. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Disappointment, or perhaps disapproval. She had offered me a role in her world, and I had politely turned it down in favor of my own. The first line had been drawn. When I told Aaron about the conversation, he did what he always did when faced with potential conflict involving his mother. He minimized it. Oh, that's just Mom's way, he said, shrugging. She's from a different generation. She thinks that's a compliment. She sees you're capable and wants you to be part of her world. Don't take it so seriously. She'll come around once she gets to know you better. But Aaron, she was asking me to give up a piece of my career, I said. That's not a small thing. I know, and I support you 100%, he insisted. You know I do. Just be patient with her. For me. I agreed to be patient, but I also made a quiet promise to myself. I would not compromise on my goals. My future wasn't negotiable. I loved Aaron, but I had worked too hard to build my life to let someone else dismantle it, even with the best of intentions. The real test of my priorities came a month later. I got a frantic call from my sister, Maya. She was a sophomore at a university 3 hours away, and things were not going well. She was failing 2 of her classes, had gotten into a fight with her roommate, and was on the verge of losing the scholarship that made her education possible. She was sobbing on the phone, talking about dropping out. I was the only family she had. I booked a train ticket for the next morning. The problem was that the upcoming weekend was the 80th birthday party for Aaron's grandmother. It was a huge family affair, and my attendance was expected. I called Aaron first, explaining the situation. He was understanding. Of course you have to go. Family comes first. Then came the harder call. I dialed Eleanor's number. I explained that a serious family emergency had come up with my sister, and I wouldn't be able to make it to the party. I apologized profusely. Her response was clipped and cool. I see. Well, family is very important. We will certainly miss you. I do hope your sister's issue is resolved quickly. The subtext hung in the air. My family crisis was an unprofessional and unwelcome disruption to her perfectly planned event. To her, it wasn't a legitimate reason. It was a sign of a chaotic, unreliable life that was bleeding into her sons. I spent 3 days with Maya, talking to her professors, meeting with the dean of students, and finding her a tutor and a counselor. We made a plan. She wasn't going to drop out. By the time I got back, exhausted but relieved, I felt I had done the right thing. But I also knew I had failed one of Eleanor's unspoken tests. I had proven that my world contained emergencies and obligations that had nothing to do with hers. The label she had for me started to circulate. I found out from Aaron's cousin Sarah a few weeks later. We were at a casual barbecue at her house. She was blunter and less concerned with appearances than the rest of the family. While we were getting drinks, she looked at me and said, "I like you, Ava. So I'm just going to tell you. My Aunt Eleanor has been saying you're ambitious, but in the wrong direction. She told my mom she's worried your life is too complicated for Aaron." Hearing the words spoken aloud stung, but it was also a strange kind of gift. It clarified everything. Eleanor didn't just disapprove of my career, she disapproved of my life. My responsibilities, my background, my refusal to fit neatly into the box she had prepared. It was all part of the same problem. I wasn't an asset, I was a liability. I thanked Sarah for her honesty and decided I wouldn't let it eat at me. I would simply be myself. If that wasn't good enough, then this wasn't the right family for me, or the right man. The weight of it all was getting to me. I felt like I was constantly on trial. I mentioned it during a meeting with my mentor from my certification program, Dr. Albright. She was a formidable woman in her 60s who had built a massive consulting firm from the ground up. I explained the situation with Eleanor, the constant pressure to conform, the feeling that I was always being judged. She listened patiently, then leaned forward. Ava, let me tell you something it took me 30 years to learn. You cannot build a life on someone else's approval. Boundaries are not walls you put up to keep people out. They are the clear, well-marked lines that show people where your property begins. You don't need to apologize for your ambition or for your family responsibilities. They are part of who you are. The right partner and the right family will see them as strengths. Stop trying to pass their tests. Instead, show them what your standards are. Demonstrate your reliability through your actions, not by auditioning for a role you don't want. Her words were like a bracing wind. She was right. I had been trying to win a game where the rules were rigged against me. It was time to stop playing. My chance to put her advice into practice came sooner than I expected. Eleanor called me to discuss the upcoming party for her husband's promotion. She had a proposition. Ava, I was thinking, since you're so good at organizing things, why don't you come over early on the day of the party and give me a hand? You could oversee the caterers, arrange the flowers for the main table, and maybe help me with the seating chart. It would be a wonderful way for us to bond, and it would give you a chance to see how a real family evening is managed from the inside. There it was, the ultimate test. She wasn't just asking me to help. She was asking me to perform the role of the diligent, domestically focused future daughter-in-law. The old me would have reluctantly agreed, determined to do it perfectly, to prove my worth. The new me remembered Dr. Albright's advice. Eleanor, that's a very generous offer, I began, choosing my words carefully. I'd love to help, but I think my skills would be better used in a different way. I know the donation drive for the community center is happening the same week as the party, and you're the lead organizer. That must be incredibly stressful to manage alongside a big family event. Why don't I take the entire donation drive off your hands? I can handle all the logistics, the volunteer schedule, coordinating the donation pickups, the inventory, everything. That would free you up completely to focus on the party for Robert. I'd be happy to contribute my professional expertise to a cause you care so much about. There was a long, charged silence on the other end of the line. I had refused her test and proposed my own. I wasn't offering to be a hostess in training. I was offering to be a competent project manager on my own terms. Finally, she said, "Very well. That would be helpful. I will send you the details." Her voice was tight. I had won the point, but I hadn't won her over. I immediately told Aaron what had happened. He was audibly relieved. "That's brilliant. It's the perfect solution. You're helping, but in a way that makes sense for you." "Aaron, this is important," I said, my voice serious. "I need you to understand what this means. I'm not going to be the person your mother seems to want me to be. I won't manage our social calendar or our household exclusively. Our life will be a partnership, a real one, where we both contribute to everything. Does she know that's how you see it?" He hesitated. "I mean, we haven't had, like, a formal conversation about it," he mumbled. "But she'll see. Once we're married, she'll see how we do things." "No, Aaron," I said, my patience wearing thin. "She needs to know now, because right now your silence looks like agreement. She thinks you're on her side, just waiting for me to fall in line. You have to talk to her before the party." "I will," he promised. "I will." But a knot of dread formed in my stomach. I had a strong feeling he wouldn't. The week of the party was a whirlwind. I threw myself into organizing the donation drive. I created a streamlined system for pickups, used a simple software to manage volunteer shifts, and kept a running tally of donations that was updated in real time. It was complex, but it was exactly the kind of work I loved. 2 days before the party, Aaron's father, Robert, showed up at the community center. He said he was just in the neighborhood, but I knew he had come to see what I was doing. He didn't say much, just watched me for about 20 minutes as I directed a team of volunteers unloading a truck and fielded a call from a corporate donor. When he was about to leave, he came over to me. "This is impressive, Ava," he said quietly. "You've created order out of chaos." He paused, looking at a stack of neatly labeled boxes. "Eleanor, she values order above all else. When her younger sister died, it was very sudden, an accident. The aftermath was messy. A lot of things fell apart. I think Eleanor has spent the rest of her life trying to prevent that kind of disorder from ever touching her family again. Sometimes it makes her hold on too tight. It wasn't an excuse for her behavior, but it was an explanation. It made her seem less like a villain and more like a woman governed by her own fears. It didn't change what I had to do, but it changed how I saw her. The donation drive was a resounding success. We collected twice the amount of goods they had anticipated. The director of the center was ecstatic. I sent Eleanor a brief, professional email with the final numbers and a summary of the event's success. She replied with a single sentence. "Thank you for your hard work." On the day of the party, I arrived not as a helper, but as a guest. I came with Aaron, on time. I had done my part, fulfilled my promise. I felt calm, centered. I was there to celebrate Robert's promotion and be a supportive partner to Aaron. I had nothing to prove. The evening was going smoothly until just after dinner. We were all in the living room. Someone asked me how the donation drive had gone, and I gave a short positive account. That was when Eleanor saw her opening. One of the catering staff came over to whisper something to her. Her brow furrowed for a moment. It was a minor issue with the dessert schedule, something easily fixed. But she used that tiny crack in her perfectly ordered evening to make her move. That's when she stood up, got the room's attention, and delivered her verdict on me. I took a slow breath, letting it out steadily as the silence in the room stretched on. I turned my body slightly to face Eleanor directly, meeting her unwavering gaze. I did not raise my voice. I did not let it tremble. "Thank you for your honesty, Eleanor," I said, the quiet words cutting through the tension. "But I believe you're operating under a different definition of partnership than I am. A family, to me, isn't about one person giving up their life to service the others. It's about two strong, whole people choosing to build something together. My commitment to my career and my sister doesn't take away from my ability to be a partner. It's proof of it. It shows that I am reliable, that I honor my obligations, and that I don't walk away when things get difficult." I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. My reliability isn't measured by whether I can arrange flowers for a party. It's measured by whether I keep my promises. I made you a promise this week that I would handle the donation drive so you wouldn't have to, and I kept it. That is the kind of partner I am. It's the only kind I know how to be. The silence returned, but this time, it felt different. It was charged with a new energy. And then, finally, Aaron moved. He took a step away from me, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to abandon me there. But instead, he walked forward until he was standing between me and his mother. "Mom, you're wrong," he said. His voice was quiet, but it resonated with a firmness I had never heard from him before. He turned his head to look at me, his eyes full of an apology that was 1,000 words deep. Then he faced his mother again. "I am the one to blame for this," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I've let you believe that my idea of a wife is the same as yours because I didn't want to have this fight. I avoided it. And my silence has hurt Ava, and it has misled you. That was cowardly, and it stops right now." He took a deep breath. "The partner I want is exactly like Ava. I don't want a woman who will erase her own ambitions to make my life easier. I want a partner whose drive inspires me. Her commitments to her sister and her business don't threaten our future. They are a part of what makes her the person I love. She has a backbone, and I would not want her without it." He looked around the room at his father, his aunts, and uncles. "These tests you've been putting her through, Mom, they have to stop. They're not for her to pass. They're for me to reject. I am not looking for a wife to fill a position. I am choosing to build a life with this woman, the person she is right now, not the person you want her to be." Eleanor was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked as if the very foundation of her world had been shaken. She tried to recover, to push back. "But Aaron, a man in your position needs... There are expectations. Hosting clients, managing the household." Aaron cut her off, not with anger, but with unshakable certainty. "And we will do those things together. We'll figure it out. We'll hire help if we need it. What I will not do, ever, is ask her to shrink herself to fit into a box just to make you or anyone else more comfortable. This is my life. This is my choice. In that moment, a profound shift occurred in the room. You could feel it. His cousin Sarah gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval, but the real surprise came from his father. Robert, who had been watching the entire exchange without a word, stepped forward. "Eleanor," he said gently, placing a hand on his wife's arm. "He's a man. He has made his choice. And I have to say, I think it's a good one." He then looked directly at me. "Ava, your work on that donation drive was more than just helpful. The director of the community center called me this morning. He said you accomplished more for them in 1 week than their own planning committee has in 6 months. That is reliability. That is contribution." The validation from Robert seemed to land with more force than Aaron's defense. It was practical, factual. It was a language Eleanor understood. She looked from her husband to her son, then to me. The anger in her face was still there, but it was now mingled with confusion and a deep, wounded pride. Aaron wasn't finished. He delivered the final, necessary boundary. "Mom, I love you. I want you in my life. But if you cannot respect Ava as my equal partner, with her own life and her own priorities, then we will have to take a step back. We won't be coming to big family events like this for a while. Her peace of mind is more important to me than keeping up appearances." The finality in his tone was absolute. He wasn't asking for her permission. He was informing her of the new reality. The choice was now hers: adapt or be left behind. We left shortly after that. The car ride home was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Aaron drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine. After a few minutes, he pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face me. "I am so sorry, Ava," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have said all of that months ago, the minute she suggested you drop your classes. I should have shut it down then. I was being a coward. I was so afraid of that confrontation that I let you face it all alone. It will never happen again." I promise I looked at him, really looked at him. It wasn't just the words, it was what he had done. He had finally stood up, not just for me, but for the life he wanted to live. He had risked his mother's wrath, not with a shouted rebuttal, but with a calm, clear declaration of his own values. He had chosen us. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. I needed to see that. A week later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered. "Ava, it's Eleanor." My heart skipped a beat. Her voice was strained, formal. "I'm calling because I received a phone call from the director at the community center. Robert gave him your contact information. They were so impressed with your work on the drive that they want to offer you a contract to manage the logistics for all 4 of their major fundraising events this year." I was stunned. I hadn't expected that. "It seems," she continued, the words sounding like they were costing her a great deal, "that your professional skills are indeed very valuable." It wasn't an apology, not a real one. There was no, "I'm sorry for what I said." But it was something else. It was an acknowledgement. It was respect, offered on my terms, in the language of my world, a professional contract, earned through competence. "Thank you for letting me know, Eleanor," I replied, my voice steady. "I appreciate you passing along the message." That was the end of the call. It wasn't a warm and fuzzy reconciliation, but it was a start. It was a small cracked open door to a different kind of relationship, one based not on antiquated expectations, but on mutual respect. Aaron and I are still building our life together. The conversations we have now are different. We talk about how we will support each other's careers, how we will share the load of family obligations, mine and his, and how we will build a home that is a partnership in every sense of the word. The foundation feels solid now, not because I passed some archaic test, but because when the blueprint was challenged, we held firm and chose to draw our own. I know Eleanor may never fully be my biggest fan, but she now knows where the lines are drawn. I am no longer auditioning for a role in her family's story. I am the co-author of my own, and I finally have a partner who is holding the pen right alongside me,